Hello and welcome to Beetle and Board Games. Today we're looking at 5 tips that will step up your product photography. So tip number 1, your first impression is everything. And let me explain. So I try to take unique product photography via board games. So board games are going to be the example that I use throughout this whole video. But even if you're using board games, these tips all apply to all types of product photography. So before you even take a picture, I want you to take a second and think about this game. So Fireball Island was a classic game that was remade. What is the first thing that you think of when you hear and when you see Fireball Island? I'm thinking reds, oranges, yellows. It's a fireball, right? So I'm thinking heat. I'm visualizing a volcano erupting. You're running away from the island. I'm also thinking about bugs and the jungle. All these emotions and ideas, all that is indicative of darker emotions, right? It's not really a happy feeling that you are running away from a volcano. Now that's important because that's going to influence the type of pictures that you take, at least for me. So the reason why the first impression is so important is because this is the first idea, the first thought that you are presenting to your audience. And on top of that, this is what your audience first sees. So right away, they're going to form judgment based on what you show, and if it aligns with their expectations, it leaves an everlasting effect, right? And usually that tends to look better. So I did a B-roll or a showcasing sequence on Fireball Island previously. I want you to take a look at this B-roll sequence and see if that resonates with you with that first impression. What do you think? That was pretty cool, huh? Okay, so that first impression, pirate ship. Okay, what do you think of when you see a pirate ship? On Fireball Island, there was an expansion called Wreck of the Crimson Cutlass. There was actually 3 ships. The first thing you think of, when a ship is shipwrecked, is that it's laying on the beach and kind of the waves are crashing against it. When your viewers see that, they automatically resonate like, oh, cool. So it makes that product so much more immersive when you're able to portray things that align with their original idea. So it looks so much cooler when you're able to project all these factors that interplay with the ship along with the product itself. So imagine if you take a piece and just put it on the table, right? It's a totally different feeling. So it looks so much cooler when you're able to capitalize on that first impression of what it means to be shipwrecked. Right after that, it cuts to the Fireball Island part. So that's when you see the actual fire. The color grading is like reds and oranges, and all that plays into your first impression. That was tip number 1. Tip number 2 is to tell a story. Wait, before you leave, it's not some other cliche video. Okay, hear me out here. I know you hear all the time, oh, you gotta tell a story with your videography. Oh, you gotta tell a story here with your photography. But I think we can amend that statement a little bit and make it work for us in 2019, okay? We want to tell a resonating story, and that's important. Take this other game called Cerebria, for instance. So Cerebria is basically, if you've seen Inside Out the movie, it is a game about 2 different teams of emotions. You have Team Gloom, which are like the darker and sadder emotions, and then you have Team Bliss, which are the happy emotions. And one in particular on the Team Gloom side was called Misery. So the first thing I thought of was, when you're trying to tell a story that resonates with people, is, well, what makes me miserable? And at the time, it was raining like every other day, so naturally, rain was what made me miserable, and that's what I wanted to capitalize on. So I took the actual figure Misery, and then waited for a day that was actually pouring rain, and then found a rock, found a puddle, and I was like, you know what would make it more depressing? You know what would make it even more depressing? Is if you take Misery, you put it in a puddle while it's pouring rain outside, and then waiting for it to rain hard so you can see the droplets of water along the puddle. And the final piece for that picture was the tower. In Cerebria, each team is competing to build a tower. Now, Team Gloom will have the blue pieces, and then Team Bliss would have all the orange pieces. So on top of the tower being blue to add to the depressing emotions, I wanted to add a tower right behind Misery. That way it also highlights more of the components of the game itself when you're taking all those factors together. That is part of telling why'd I do that? Okay. So all that is part of telling a resonating story, okay? You're looking into the game manual, you're understanding the rules, mechanics, and the gameplay itself, and then you're laying that on top of your first impression of what it means to be miserable. Tip number 3, distinguish your products from each other, okay? There are a lot of really, really amazing photographers on Instagram, and they have a really distinct style on their color grading. So they have a nice little 9x9 grid on Instagram, and that's totally fine. But for me, as much as I wanted to color grade and kind of synchronize my entire Instagram grid together, I felt like it was important to distinguish each board game from each other, because each board game has their own types of gameplay, their own themes, and their own story that you want to be able to tell. If you synchronize all those games together, they kind of lose that face value. So if you're following my Instagram at B-Roll and Board Games, actually I'll just pull it up for you. I'm gonna scroll all the way down, and you see here, okay, so here we have Spirits of the Forest, which was the very first set of pictures that I took. So right away, you can already distinguish 5 different board games just based on the grid alone. So Spirits of the Forest was taken in the fall, and then naturally you have a forest theme, so that's why I wanted to add in the oranges and yellows and all those natural fall colors. And then we switch on over to STEM Epic Heroes, which was the science, technology, engineering, math. Now, naturally in those subjects, I felt like it gave more of a monotone color. That's why I chose more of the grays and whites for those. And then we switch on over to Archmage. And if you ever played mages in games, automatically you're thinking like arcane magic and kind of mystical spells. That switched on over to more of a pastel palette. Blues, purples, pinks, and whites. You have luminescence. You have the moonlight, because I felt like that played along more with Archmage. And then the Fireball Island pictures, which all match the reds, oranges, and yellows. And then we finally switch over to Cerebia, all those were more of the blues and grays. And so color is a really good way to be able to distinguish your product's themes from each other. Oh my god, it's getting hot here. How about we step outside for a second? Okay, so tip number 4, then bring an ND filter when you're outside in broad daylight in the afternoon. You need to develop the mentality that no one else is about to do what you're gonna do now. And don't take that the wrong way. Okay, we're all here to grow together. We're all here to learn. We're all here to make unique product photography. And to do that, you have to kind of develop your own style. And in order to develop your own style, you have to deviate from what is commonly seen. And then as obvious as that sounds, it actually really helps me think of ideas for a shoot. And a really good example of that was actually Wingspan. So when Wingspan first came out, it was talked about everywhere. Everyone was talking about it. There's so many pictures of it. But I was surprised that, at least at the time, all those egg miniatures, we didn't see, I was surprised that I didn't see it in a nest. So what I did was I went out to Michael's, found a nest. I woke up at sunrise for the golden hour color, and then also got some feathers from Michael's. And I had the feathers, and I just kept dropping them until I had one that I was happy with. You know, that one that matched with the sunlight colors, and also one that, you know, wasn't blurry. And then from there, yeah, I thought the end product turned out pretty good. My usual ratio for taking photos, about like 0.5%. Take 300, and I think 2 are somewhat decent. And tip number 5, last tip I have for you. Actually kind of hard to walk up a ladder, hold the camera, and stabilize this thing. But look here, it's not the most flattering environment. Okay, so obviously it's not the most flattering environment, not the most ideal, but it still gives really good ideas. Tip number 5 is to match your environment with your product. Okay, even if I have a kind of rusty, dirty, you know, just because something is like off-putting to our eyes doesn't mean it's gonna make for, you know, and that's why I enjoyed photography to begin with, because it shows you a whole new perspective that you can't see with your own eyes. You know, if I see this shed right away, you're not going to be inclined to take a picture of it, right? You're waiting for some amazing landscape photos, but in reality, what you can do is use this environment to your advantage. And a good example of that is the dragon miniature from the Grim Forest. Right? You think of kind of like a wasteland environment, fire, red. All these ideas and thoughts can actually be projected onto your environment itself, which is why first thing I thought of was using this, you know, rusty old shed. You can see, and even though I took those photos a long time ago, you can still see the remnants of all the smoke that I used to cover the background. That way, all you can see is just this landscape, which looks more like a wasteland, that helps you take a better picture. Your environment is everything. Okay? And don't just let off-putting environments turn you away from a good photo, because those environments actually can make for the best photos.